those future volunteers. So thank you for allowing us to record tonight. And to get started, now that I know who's in the room here, I can tell you a little bit about myself and our volunteer team. So my name is Mike, and I started to volunteer with the Park Connection last March when I was laid off from my restaurant job because of the pandemic. I was looking for ways to get outside, and I started to volunteer with the Coldwater crew at Coldwater Spring. They're a really awesome volunteer crew that meets at the spring weekly to do restoration work, and I really fell in love with the work they were doing. And then this AmeriCorps position opened up with the Park Connection. So I'm a Minnesota GreenCorps member serving with the Park Connection. And I am serving on appointment until this August. And I am joined by some really awesome colleagues, as you can see here in this photo. This is me. Can you guys see my mouse?
We can.
We can, fantastic. So this is me here, and then to my right, we have Erica, who just joined us recently, so we do not have an updated photo with her, and she's our community volunteer ambassador with the National Park Service. We have Paula Swingley down here, who's a park ranger, Mary Hammis, who's our lead environmental steward. We have Becca Hansen, a fellow AmeriCorps member, Tamara Few, our program coordinator, and Andrew Morotz. She does a lot of our volunteer coordination as well. So we really divide up the tasks, so you'll probably be interacting with each and every one of us, but we are the volunteer team of the National Park. And something I just sort of talking about the purpose of tonight's presentation, I first got involved with the Park Connection because I was asking a friend who's very involved with volunteering along the river about different ways to get involved with doing restoration work. It was something I was pretty interested in. And he recommended the Park Connection, and that's kind of how this all happened. So I kind of want to have tonight's meeting to also kind of have the feeling of having a friend tell you about some different opportunities. So I want it to be sort of informal. The first half of the presentation, I want to focus on just sort of giving you a rundown of our volunteer program, and then having that second half be reserved for questions and answers. And in the meantime, if you have a question pop up, feel free to put it in the chat, and I will get it either at the end or as we go here. So that said, I'm going to be giving a lot of information as well. So if it feels overwhelming, don't worry. I'm going to send a follow-up information with kind of recapping the main points as well as how to find out about future opportunities. So you'll be getting an email with relevant information. So don't get overwhelmed by the amount of information I'm going to be throwing out here in just a few moments. Before I started volunteering with the park, I didn't actually know that I was living alongside a national park. So the Mississippi National River and Recreation Area is, of course, in this green shaded area here. And it's a 72-mile urban national park that runs from about Hastings up to Ramsey area. So it's a pretty unique park. And before I dive into it, I want to just give a quick land acknowledgement. Because all of this work that we do and all of the land that the national park currently occupies is the traditional homelands of the Dakota people who continue to care for these spaces today. But as we think about how we want to become stewards of this land, or how we want to, engage further in the stewardship of this land, I think it's important to recognize that history and think about our contributions as being part of this larger history of land stewardship along the river. I know that in the Google form, a lot of you mentioned how close you live to the river, so you might be aware that you're in a national park. But I think that's something that's really unique about our park. We work and do restoration activities in the neighborhoods and parks that we work, live, and play in. And I think that proximity is a really interesting and unique part of our park. It also means that we get to have like a pretty robust volunteer program. It might be more difficult to get volunteers at a place like Glacier or Yosemite that are a little more isolated. But considering we live in such a bustling metro area, It means that we're really able to engage volunteers in all aspects of our work, which I think makes our national park special. Another thing that I think makes our park special is that we are a partnership park. So unlike those older parks out west and elsewhere, the Mississippi National River and Recreation Area, or we'll just call it MNRA because that's a mouthful, it was established in 1988. So of course, different counties and landowners already had land at that point in that area. So of the 54,000 acres that comprise our national park, only 100 are owned by the National Park Service. This means that a lot of our work takes place in collaboration with county governments, with watershed districts, with city governments, with park boards, with the universities and other landholders. And we see ourselves as sort of a body to help bolster the habitat restoration goals of these different entities. So we work across 21 different cities across 5 different counties. So it means that we have a ton of partners in the work that we do. So oftentimes our activities are co-sponsored or co-organized by, the Anoka County Soil and Conservation Districts or University of Minnesota Land Care. So we are a partnership park, which makes our work inherently collaborative, I think, in a really unique way. I think it also means that our volunteer program can really fill in important gaps. As a lot of you probably know, the forestry or natural resources departments of county governments are usually pretty underfunded or don't have a lot of capacity to do a lot of the work they might want to do. I think that our volunteer program we're able to leverage to help those entities sort of accomplish some of their restoration goals that they might not otherwise have time or resources for. So I think that our volunteer program really provides a really awesome bolstering of that capacity to care for our natural lands, which I think is pretty special. One more thing I'll say about how special our national park is that it comprises a lot of different ecosystems. Of course, it's a very narrow strip of land along the river, but we get to work in oak savannas and prairies, in floodplain forests, and in parks that are right along downtown. So even though it's kind of a tight area, we get to do work in a lot of different ecosystems, which I think is pretty special. So there's a National Park Service, and then there's Mississippi Park Connection. So what is the connection between us two? Well, the Park Connection was founded in 2007 as a nonprofit partner of the National Park, so the Friends Group of the National Park. And today we have a staff of 10, including a number of 3 currently AmeriCorps members, sort of a rotating cast of temporary workers there, who do work in a variety of areas. But we all work very closely with MNRA and National Park Service and do programs with rangers. And we work really closely with our national park partners. And as you can see in our mission and vision statement, sort of our overarching goal is to connect people to the river in various ways. That could look like connecting youth to the river through education programming, other public programming, educational programming, as well as restoration work. So our goal is really just to get people to get on the river and help facilitate those really amazing experiences that a lot of us have with the river. So what do volunteers actually do? Volunteers play a really massive role in that mission. So while we've had to limit our group sizes in the past year due to the pandemic, in 2019, pre-pandemic, we had 9,631 volunteers contribute a collective 45,688 hours of volunteer work. That's a really massive amount of energy and time that folks spent in our park. And the majority of those volunteers were individuals, but we also do work with groups. So we do restoration events with Girl Scout troops, as well as corporate groups from places like Cub or Surly Brewing. So if you work for like an organization or a company that has sort of a volunteer goal as part of your work, we're also always happy to work with groups. And we do a lot of our work that way as well. Of course, the elephant in the room is COVID, as you can see here by the masks. we still were able to get volunteers out during COVID. A lot of our work is able to be distanced pretty naturally. But, of course, our programming took a bit of a hit. But we've been able to sort of be adaptable and continue in different capacities, doing education work virtually, as well as sort of limiting our numbers for volunteering out in our parks and kind of experimenting as we go. But now, as we head into the spring, we feel in a really comfortable space to be able to do work back in large groups of about 20 right now. A lot of our programs, are sort of in that 15 to 20 person range. So we're able to do that in a safe way. So I'm happy to say now that springtime, we're getting folks back in the field in groups like the one you see here. So what are the volunteers actually doing during those 45,600 plus hours? To answer that question, I want to look at Plant for the Future, which is our primary habitat restoration campaign right now. And as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, the emerald ash borer is really fundamentally changing our forest ecosystems here in Minnesota. For those of you who don't know, the ash borer is an introduced beetle that has been in the Midwest for about 15 years, I believe. That first came over here through firewood transport. And it kills ash trees. And ash trees are native to Minnesota. They play a really important ecological as well as cultural role. But Minnesota is projected to lose 1 billion ash trees over the next few years. And 40% of the trees in our national park are ash trees as well, about 25 to 40. So that's about 500,000 trees within our national park that we are projected to lose within the next decade. So this kind of represents sort of an existential threat to our forest ecosystems. So to counter that, we had a number of meetings with the different landowners and land managers within our national park to talk about, okay, how do we counter this? And that's kind of where the Plant for the Future campaign came out. So our goal over the past few years has been to plant 15,000 trees across our national park. As you can see here, there are trees being planted in Pigs Eye Regional Park, I believe in sort of an area that has a canopy gap, possibly brought on by the emerald ash borer. So trying to fill in those canopy gaps, but also do it in a way that is forward-looking. As we think about our changing Minnesota climate change adaptation is really at the forefront of a lot of our restoration work. So of those 15,000 trees, we're planting about 70 different tree species because we know that having a diverse range of trees will guarantee or help ensure, nothing is guaranteed in this work, I suppose, help ensure a more resilient and sustainable forest moving forward. So we've also been, of those 70 trees, a lot of the species, including sycamore, tupelo, bald cypress, sweet gum, are southern adapted. So we're also trying to facilitate the northern migration of species to our national park. And this both allows us to fill in our canopy while also doing some interesting community science work, trying to study. A lot of our volunteers help us track and study how these southern adapted trees are surviving, what their survival rate is, how they're doing, noticing their phenological changes. So climate change adaptation is a major part of this campaign. I just have this graphic here to kind of show how Minnesota's climate is projected to change by 2095, having summers that look a little bit like Nebraska's or Omaha's, and having winters that look more like Northern Illinois. So as we think about all the different trees we're losing, we're trying to replace them in a really forward-looking way. Another aspect of the Plant for the Future campaign is to assist in the regeneration of cottonwood trees. Cottonwoods are, of course, a hallmark species of our national park. They're so important ecologically to the water cycle as well as culturally to indigenous communities. And I'm sure all of us have experienced the whistling of cottonwood trees and the wind. They're pretty fantastic, but unfortunately, they've been having a really hard time generating naturally due to increased and more unpredictable flooding events, as well as activities from browsers like deer and beaver. So we've been, as you can see here on the photo on the right, helping plant young cottonwood trees. There's a lot of old cottonwood trees in the park, but not a lot of young ones. So we're trying to fill that gap a little bit while also protecting them with fencing and tree tubes. We also have a lot of volunteers who help by monitoring the plots that we have planted to make sure that there isn't a tree that fell on the fence that's allowing deer to come in and eat those young cottonwoods. So cottonwood regeneration has really been an important part of this work as well. Now, it's not all planting trees. A lot of the times we are removing species, removing industry species like buckthorn or burdock that outcompete more local or more ecologically beneficial species. So here, I think we're cutting some buckthorn at Settlers Island in Cottage Grove. So a lot of our work is also related to removing burdock, garlic mustard, crown vetch, buckthorn. So a lot of our habitat restoration work is focused in that area and taking care of the forest understory as well. In addition to removing those species from the understories, we also do a lot of native plantings of grasses and shrubs. Here we're planting at Coldwater Spring, I believe, and really trying to make overall a more vibrant ecosystem at all layers of our park, all levels of the forest. One of my favorite activities is actually seed collection, where we go to some of the more successful prairies in our park to collect seeds and distribute them to prairies that are a little bit less active. And that usually happens in the late summer and early fall. We do seed collection activities, and that's always a lot of fun to get out in the prairies when there are just some amazing colors, amazing golds out there in that time of year. Of course, it's not all about planting and removing stuff and putting stuff in and out of the ground. We also do a lot of community science as part of our restoration objectives. We facilitate a number of projects where we, again, help fill in that gap that county entities or park boards might not have the resources to fill themselves. On the left here is a photo of some volunteers who are surveying ash trees at Kings Island in Anoka. And that data that they collect is going to help inform how Anoka County deals with the emerging emerald ash borer. So we're collecting that data there, which is really exciting. And that's a project that's ongoing that you can very much get involved with. My colleague Becca directs that program. I'm also leading a community science monitoring project at St. Paul's Crosby Farm, where we recently planted 1,200 trees as part of a climate change adaptation project. That community science project involves the phenological tracking of some of those, tracking of phenological characteristics in those trees, especially looking at the ones that are from more southern zones to see how they're growing and adapting in Minnesota. So we are establishing sort of some great data for that long-term climate study that's actually being led by researchers at the University of Minnesota. So that's another example of a collaboration where we're able to help researchers with their volunteer program. My colleague Erica is also kicking off a project aimed at monitoring monarch butterflies at Coldwater Spring. I believe that group meets weekly from early June until the end of July, and they examine monarch and milkweed populations. That's a really fun project, and Coldwater is a really unique oak savanna environment. And I'll have a link for that activity coming up as well, because we're actively looking for volunteers for that. I will say too, earlier I mentioned to put your comments in the chat. I'm having a hard time opening the chat. So just know that if you're writing questions or comments in there, I'll get to them at the end of the presentation. Sorry, a year into the Zoom calls and I'm still finding hiccups in the ways I'm running these in running Zoom. So if you have questions, again, just go ahead and put them in the chat and I'll get to them at the end. As well as in addition to those group community science activities, we have many volunteers who help track plants and wildlife on their own time, when they're on their own walks through whatever park they live near. And they use a smartphone app called iNaturalist and Nature's Notebook, which some of you might be familiar with. In recent years, participants have made over 6,000 observations and documented more than 700 species. Again, because it's a smartphone app, it's able to be done independently on your own time. There's like a group within the app that you upload the data to, or you upload your observations that our rangers use. So it's a great way to do something on your own time there. And if you haven't monitored wildlife before, then it's really no problem. We have training videos on our website where you can learn how it works. It can be a little bit intimidating if you don't know what to look for, but we have our ranger Sharon, who is in charge of these projects, and she does a good job explaining it and is always open to questions too. So if that's something that's of interest to you, just making observations in your own park, that's something that's also you can do through our volunteer program as well. I mentioned that you don't need experience doing that sort of observation work in the past, and that goes for all of our programs. Before I got started volunteering with the Park Connection, I didn't really have much useful experience in doing habitat restoration work, but I did a lot of learning on site. Before every event, we do a demonstration and quick little training, as you can see here through this photo. We also have all the tools that you might need as well. So you don't need to worry about, oh, do I have the right tool? Do I have the right skill set? For almost every experience, you're able to participate without having any previous experience before. So that's something I want to let you know. And also, while no previous experience is necessary, there are opportunities for leadership and growth within the program as well. After spending some time volunteering with the Park Connection, you can actually become a habitat restoration crew leader. Our crew leaders are some of my favorite people in the world, and they help lead our volunteer events and some of our regular crews that meet up. It just involves attending some additional trainings as well as to committing to a couple of volunteer events a month. But our crew, we really rely on our crew leaders to bring their expertise to the field. It's always great to have them when we have a big group of 20 and there's only one staff person. To have another leader in the field is also great. So if you're interested in learning about or developing your outdoor leadership skills or event facilitation skills, becoming a crew leader is a really great way to do that while contributing to the park. I will say too, a great place to start with volunteering is through some of our regular volunteer crews. So we have a lot of one-time events that take place throughout different parks. But we also have these crews that meet up at a single park regularly. So the first crew that I'll mention is the Coldwater crew. I've been saying that name a couple times, but that's at Coldwater Spring, which is right by Minnehaha Falls and the dog park over there. And they meet every Tuesday evening and Thursday morning. And they're led by some really awesome crew leaders. And they focus on restoring the oak savanna. They've been meeting for more than a decade. And over that time, they've really transformed that ecosystem. They do a lot of removing introduced species, including especially buckthorn and garlic mustard. But again, that's a group that meets at Coldwater on Tuesdays and Thursdays. They're resuming again in May after a hiatus due to COVID. But that's a great way to get involved. The crew that I lead is the Crosby crew. So we are at Crosby Farm Regional Park. Again, that's where our climate change adaptation research site is located, where we planted those 1,200 trees. And we meet on a Wednesday afternoon and Saturday morning every month. And we're focused on collecting climate adaptation data around the plantings, as well as removing introduced species, which are very prevalent in that area as well as sort of taking care of the saplings and other needs that arise. It's kind of a experimental group because they're involved in taking care of this climate change experiment. So the tasks really change every time you come. But we we try to let you know in advance what you're going to be getting yourself into. So that's at Crosby Crew, and that's twice a month as well. We also have Mill Ruins, which is a great opportunity if you live, especially in like Northeast Minneapolis or near downtown. They meet at Mill Ruins Park every Saturday morning from May through the end of October. And they do a lot of work to restore that hillside in that park. If you're familiar with it, the Stone Arch Bridge is over here for a reference point. And yeah, they meet every Saturday, and they focus on removing garbage and litter from that area as well as other needs that arise. That's another great crew lead led event as well. One of our newest crews is the BiPOC Outdoors Twin Cities group. BiPOC stands for Black, Indigenous, and Person of Color. So this group is for volunteers who identify as Black, Indigenous, or people of color, and it's meant to provide a safer, sort of more community-oriented space for working and volunteering in the outdoors. It's led by Tamara Few, our program coordinator, and they do work across the national park. They're in sort of a different park every time, but they meet a couple of Saturdays every month. So that's a really consistent group as well that you can join if you identify as BiPOC. And for all these restoration crews, I know it can sound intimidating to oh, you can join this crew, but they're all very welcoming. They're drop-in. You don't have to sign up every single time. They're every single Saturday or every single month. They're very much a drop-in crew, drop-in crews. But it's kind of a good way to get involved because they meet regularly, you know, same time, same day, same place throughout the month. So it's a good way to kind of find a rhythm and find the park and the time that works best for your schedule. So that's a good way to sort of get started as well. Of course, there are a number of ways to get involved that beyond environmental stewardship activities. And one great way to do so is to volunteer at one of our visitor service centers. So we have two visitor service centers. There's one at the Science Museum of Minnesota, which you can see here actually. And there's another one at St. Anthony Falls Lock and Dam, which is by St. Anthony Falls Lock and Dam and the Stone Arch Bridge in that area. At both locations, we look for volunteers who can commit to sort of weekly, long-term shifts on either weekdays or weekends. So this one might be a little bit more involved, like, okay, I'll be volunteering to greet visitors and guide visitors there every, you know, Wednesday afternoon or whenever would work for you. I don't believe that trainings are being offered right now, or if there are any available shifts, but there will be some offered in the near future, I believe. And probably coming up later this spring. I will say to get involved with these activities at the Visitor Service Center, it's best to volunteer elsewhere before. It's kind of best to kind of get your hands dirty with a couple of habitat restoration events before working in a visitor service center, just to familiarize yourself with the park. I know a lot of you may also already be really familiar with the park, so that's totally fine. You can probably go straight to the service center. But if not, we recommend sort of coming out with us to learn more about our programming before starting in one of the visitor services centers. Another great way to familiarize yourself with the park is to engage with some of the training resources that we have available on our website. So on our website, you can find a number of previous trainings. This screenshot here is kind of a screenshot of a Zoom call on a Zoom call, so it's a little bit funky. But this is the screenshot of a tree ID training that we had in February at Coldwater Spring. It was a virtual event. So you can sort of watch those videos and do those trainings and earn volunteer hours that way. So we really encourage the growth of our volunteers, and utilizing those training resources available on our website is a great way to earn some hours while also learning more about the park and some of the cultural and ecological aspects of it. We also host a number of special events throughout the year that are facilitated by the National Park Service mainly. Past events have included art contests, ice fishing activity, um, let's see, heron watching event, I think happened last month. We also have our annual Illuminate the Lock event, which takes place at the St. Anthony Lock and Dam, which is an artist-led project where every year there's different artists who projects onto the side of the dam. And it's a really awesome event. We usually have a couple thousand people come out over the course of a weekend. And we utilize volunteers at all of these special events to help guide and greet visitors, to help take down and putting stuff up and taking it down. So they play a really critical role in helping those events run smoothly, because quite frankly, there's not enough staff to run an event like this. So you can help out with those one-time events as well that are pretty special and pretty fun atmosphere as well. A lot were canceled in the past year because of COVID, but we're excited to be starting with planning more of these special events in the future that encourage larger groups. There are also often just a number of needs that emerge kind of randomly. Last month we had some volunteers captioning some of our training videos, helping them which helped us make our videos more accessible by having accurate closed captionings. Things like that pop up pretty often, and those are volunteer opportunities that can often be done in the comfort of your home as well. So there's a lot of sort of one-time special events like that as well that are focused on maybe more educational aspects. So that's like a ton of information. If you're joining us a little late, know that I am sending out an email at the end of this with links of how to sign up and places to find information about all these opportunities. But some of the best ways to find out about these opportunities, I'll just say real quick, is our volunteer e-news. It comes out at the beginning of every month. And the volunteer e-news is the email that contains information on all of the upcoming events that we have. So that is a great one-stop shop that arrives in your inbox that lets you know what's going on. Both those, it'll have those regular crew meetups as well as those one-time events, those special events, different trainings that we have uploaded that are led by our rangers. So the e-news is a great place. Social media is a great place. You don't need to be on social media to find out about these events at all, but following us on Facebook or Instagram is a great way to learn about events that are coming up really soon, as well as to get a peek at other more in-depth curiosities or cultural or natural history tidbits as well. We have a lot of rangers posting on them a lot of the time, so you can also learn a lot on our social media platforms as well. Our website, parkconnection.org, is also a great way to find out about events. There's a calendar view that you can see all of the upcoming events that way. It's a good landing page as well that shows you the different events that are coming up. And again, after this, I will send out links to all of these spots as well. The final thing I want to mention is that we log all of our volunteer hours, partially because the more volunteer hours we have, the more money the federal government gives the Mississippi National River and Recreation Area. We are a small park, so we often, we don't have the same resources as Glacier or Yellowstone, but our volunteer program, because it is so robust and involves so many folks, does allow us access to a lot more additional resources from the federal government, because they see how many people are engaged in the well-being of our park, which is really special. So we log volunteer hours. We track it through Salesforce, which I won't bore you with, but just know that after this event, all of you will be getting your first, or maybe not your first, but you will be getting a volunteer hour, your first hour. And we keep track of those hours so that we give out prizes at an annual celebration. As you can see here, this was in 2019. I know it seems like it's going to be a little bit alarming with big groups unmasked these days, but hopefully we can get back to a future of having big in-person gatherings like this again. And those events are a really fun way to recognize each other and meet other volunteers, because the connections between volunteers when you work with somebody for a while are really special as well, and really one of the great parts of our volunteer program. So I've been speaking at you for quite a while now, but now it is time to turn the mic over to you all. I saw that there are some questions in the chat that I can start off with. So let me see what is in the chat. And do know that you can also feel free to put them in the chat or unmute yourself as well. The first question I see is, can you please send a link to online trainings? Absolutely. I'll make sure that the online trainings are included in my follow-up email that I'll send later tonight. I have a question here. What is the potential for attracting new insects with the new trees species that are being planted? Could that become a problem? That's a really interesting question. You know, whenever we introduce a new species to the environment, there's always the potential of something taking up a lot of space. We try to make those decisions in line with modern or accepted scientific knowledge. So we work closely with our landowners and experts, scientists in the field before making those decisions of which kind of trees to bring in. But again, you know, our goal is to not have 25 to 40% of our park being one tree. We think that having that diversity means that even if there is a pest that arises, it won't decimate our entire forest. So that's kind of the thinking behind bringing in those new tree species. And we don't want to lean on any one species while doing that kind of work as well. So I'm sure there's a better, more scientific answer to that question, but that's my answer for right now. Those are all the questions I'm seeing in the chat. If you have any, feel free to just unmute yourselves or just throw it in the chat as well.
Thanks, Mike. All these sound super interesting. I had a question about the Monarch monitoring.
Yeah.
Is that something, how frequently does that happen?
That happens every summer. And it happens from early June to late July, I believe, is the period. So it's kind of within a 2-month period where the volunteers go out weekly to Coldwater Spring. Yeah.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, weekly,
like
yep.
Weekly or bi-weekly or? Yeah.
Totally. I think the monitors kind of decide on a night that works for everybody. Usually there's about a handful. So usually it's sort of a afternoon to early evening.
Interesting, thanks.
Yeah.
And, oh, wait, another question. Are there any other butterfly species or pollinator species that you monitor as a group?
Yeah, as a group, I know there is some, I'm not sure as a group actually, but there are other monitoring. We do a lot of, is it rusty patch bumblebee? Yep, so we do a lot of that monitoring as well for the rusty patch, as well as there's a coyote howling monitoring program.
Wow.
So a lot of that is run independently, and we sort of offer, I think a ranger offers trainings on those. And some of our, one of our rangers is an expert in river otters. So she'll oftentimes lead a training on river otter activity, which is really special. And then another is actually an expert in freshwater mussels. So she has a lot of tracking on that, and there are sometimes ways to get involved through like an educational event with that as well. That one's of course a little bit harder to track, but that's another option as well. And I'll be sure to include those in the follow-up email as well. Those are mostly run through the national park and not the park connection, but yeah, kind of doing a lot of community science monitoring whenever we can.
Caitlin, you're muted.
I have a question also about the Monarch program.
Yeah.
Do you meet as a group with that? Or is it something that you go out like individually?
Yeah, I believe that one is group monitoring. I think that's the only example that it is group. I think it's because they have a pretty systemic approach to monitoring the monarchs in that area. So I think maybe everyone meets together and then sort of goes out to their own patch. I could be wrong about that though, but I will in my email connect you to Erica, who is the leader of that program, and she can let you know more about that and how it's organized.
And you don't know what day that is?
No, I think they're still waiting on. I think they decide collectively once they have the monitors in place. So in the link I'll send you, it will have a volunteer interest form that you can sign up for, and then once Erica's compiled those, I think she'll probably send out an email finding a date. But again, I think that's mostly in the early evening. And June and July, you get to sunsets a little bit later on. So I think that'll be probably after 5 p.m. I think I've seen it in the past.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Is there any volunteer stuff that's done around using the river, the accessing the kayaks and the canoes, or anything around that?
Yeah, there are opportunities to get involved to help facilitate canoeing as well. I think that's especially geared towards youth. There's canoe safety volunteering, and there's also bike safety volunteering that helps lead, I think mostly youth on biking on different trails along the river. I'm not honestly super familiar with those. I should have included them though, but I'll be sure to include more information about that in the follow-up email as well. But my colleague Paula is the one who facilitates those programs. So I'd be happy to put you in touch with her as well if that's something of interest to you.
That would be great. Thank you.
That sounds good. Is it could you remind me of your name? I'm having a hard time seeing it.
Yeah, I'm Susan
Sue?
Altman.
Awesome.
Yeah. Is it through the national parks or through Park Connection?
That one is through the national parks.
Okay.
Yeah, which is why I'm a little bit, it's a ranger-led program, but I know they're always looking for volunteers to help on those trips as well.
Okay.
So I think that'll be a really good opportunity. Something I forgot to mention as well, this isn't volunteer related, but our paddle share program is run by the Park Connection. There are a number of paddle share stops. They're kind of like nice ride stops, but they're located in different parks along the river. And that is run by us, and it's not volunteer oriented, but in terms of if you want to rent a canoe or a kayak and kayak along the river, our paddle share program is a really great way to get out on the river during the summertime.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Seeing a question from Pete, is there a difference between volunteering with Park Connection and the MPS volunteers in parks? That's a good question. It's a relationship it's taken me a long time to parse out. There is the volunteer in parks program covers most of what I've been talking about. So the volunteers in parks program is run by the National Park Service, but it's facilitated by the Park Connection. So we're kind of the volunteer wing of the Park Service. Is kind of a helpful way to think about it. Some of these other programs though, like canoeing and monitoring or their visitor service center stuff, that's not actually part of the volunteers in parks program. It's sort of a different volunteering activities, falls under a different category, I believe. But at the end of the day, we're basically one and the same. We just have kind of different points of emphases. I hope that helps. I'm still trying to parse out the relationship myself, to be honest with you, Pete. But mostly we are pretty much one and the same.
But those websites that we were looking at earlier, your examples of them, would see information from both? Exactly.
Yeah. So mostly when the Park Service has volunteer opportunities,
yes,
they usually run it through the Park Connection.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. any other questions, y'all?
No.
I would like to say if something does pop up, or if you have confusion, or if you're still trying to find a good way to get involved that maybe fits with your skill set, feel free to email me at my email that I've listed below here, and that I also emailed you with earlier yesterday or earlier this morning. I'm happy to find the right spot for you as well. This is sort of a general overview of our program, but if you want to go more in depth and find out, between myself and Paula Swingley, who's with the Park Service, we can sort of get you into that right spot as well. So if you're still kind of wondering where you might fit in after reviewing the links I send over, just go ahead and send me an email, and I'm happy to answer any other questions as well. I'll have one more opportunity for any questions. All right. Sweet. I'm also looking forward to seeing you all out there, and look for that email from me in the next few minutes here. But otherwise, thank you again so much. Please feel free to use me as a resource if you would like to learn more about our programs. And otherwise, as we say, see you on the river.
Good. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, y'all.
Thanks, good night.
Yeah, have a great
Thank
day.
you.